recording to put up into Panopto, where we record these, and we'll be discussing heuristic evaluation. I will be on the audio on the Discord channel. So if we bring that down and I go into Spin 303 lectures, and I shall share this stream with people, so they'll be able to get the low quality version on Discord if they need to for live, and I'll also be online on the Twitch chat, though Twitch doesn't seem to have necessarily jumped in and updated itself, so I'll have to go to my Twitch channel on here and get the Twitch comments from that side. Yes, at least I'm saying it's live, and that seems to be all up. Hey, we've got one person, at least one person currently on Twitch. Oh yeah, about 10 of you. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about heuristic evaluation, and then we're going to start going through, and I'll talk later about some of the requirements for this whole group formation, and I'm about to finalize those, and you'll all have your Get Labs created for your groups. I put out the groups over the weekend on Sunday, so hopefully you've seen some of those emails and you've gone and checked and see what group you're in, and hopefully I'm making a few small changes to those because we've had people who need to be in other groups, so I can make those changes. If you get emails to me shortly, I will make those changes where it makes sense, and I can readjust things and make sure they're balanced. Some of you will have noticed that it seems like the requirements for assignment for part one of the project don't seem to be beyond much what you've actually already done in terms of using XD or Balsamiq to build basically a prototype. Now, we're actually evaluating in assignment 2 your designs. This is now about merging. Most of the work is in merging rather than in actually creating new content, right? So think of this as prototyping designs, as in we've already got our designs pretty close to prototype, and now we're thinning the field down. We're taking multiple ideas and getting them down. And so that's why we talked about cognitive walkthrough on Wednesday last week, and now we're talking about heuristic evaluation. Okay, these are two different approaches to evaluating a design or a prototype or a website. Okay, so the cognitive walkthrough, you role play your persona. In heuristic evaluation, we are more interested in evaluating the actual kind of using rules to evaluate the website. So we don't try and put ourselves in task. We don't put ourselves in the role of a persona. We now look at what are good rules of thumb related to designs. Okay, and so here we're now talking about matching the conceptual model rather than trying to do a persona model. So we're not looking at the users involved. We're looking at does this work with the way we think about the process, and is this laid out using those generally good rules. Now, as we've said with color, and we talked about there being rules around what colors go well together based on where they are in the triangle, there are some heuristic evaluations we can use around websites. Okay, so and we usually sit around as a group of experts, right? So it's kind of I'm going to be an expert, right? So this is kind of the usability evaluation working group, rather than we are role-playing being users. Okay. Now, if you want to actually go to do full usability evaluation, you have this sort of room, you put people in it, you observe them, you have lots of cameras, you have evaluators outside. That's the full usability. That's where we'd all like to be able to do for all of what we do, but we can't get there, right? Not all the time. And so this is that step back. And so we talk about this as being discount usability. So yes, we recognize that's where we want to be, but of course this is where we are. We did cognitive walkthrough last week. We're doing heuristic evaluation this time. Okay, so heuristic evaluation is that the idea that what we do is basically we're giving ourselves a score chart. We have we can actually build a template of what we're going to score, and we start evaluating the website using the rules of thumbs about what's good, and we kind of give like a level of concern from, this is cosmetic, 0 to this is critical 4. So the idea is that, cosmetic stuff you get round to if you need to. Right, so it's just cosmetic. Critical are things like, the whole website crashes, so I can't buy anything, right? So if it's a purchasing website and there's the inability to process a credit card, and when I hit pay, it just spins and never finishes, that's critical, right? If you don't fix that, your whole online store is dead. So this is what we mean by the cosmetic, that's not aligned properly, to the it doesn't function and fails completely, right? So we understand there's these levels of challenge or of risk associated with that. Now, so this idea of only using a few users and doing a heuristic evaluation is that we get a few people in, few experts in, to do this heuristic evaluation. Now, what we're asking you guys to do is, in your group of 6, 4 of you you evaluate other people's designs, right? And so this is you being a heuristic evaluator. Rather than donning the role of a persona they've created, you are now evaluating it from an expert position. So there is a discussion constantly in the usability space around how many people you should get to check your website. Okay, so Nielsen came up with this idea that maybe the Nielsen group came up with the idea that maybe you can get rid of 3. You only need to do 3 or 4, right? Because 3 or 4 might grab most of the challenges, right? So what you want, if you look at those users who are successful and unsuccessful evaluators, successful ones find more of the usability problems, and here they've got this idea that there are some hard usability problems and easy ones to find. So the hard ones to find, your very best evaluators will find most of your challenges, right? So in their experiments with real evaluators, and having this rule set of check these things, they were able to find most of the bugs, right? So just actually checking each other's, having about 3 or 4 is all you would really need to evaluate the system. Okay, so I'll just take a wee check. I've got some comments coming in. Any suggested tools for ways of communicating in the groups? So initially, you communicate by email. I would recommend using Discord as a communication tool. You also have your free Zooms, which you can use, which are 40-minute meetings. I find that Zoom feels like you're supposed to be in a meeting, whereas Discord feels like you're supposed to be in organizing a chat, right? So I recommend Discord, and just create a new server yourself for your group of 6 people, right? It's actually very lightweight to do. It's quite easy, and keep that as the kind of lightweight chat when you're trying to organize some stuff, and it gives you the text history and an audio chat. And in terms of creating content, we have Office 365 and those sort of tools, but you can also use Google Docs and those sort of tools if you're more familiar or you feel comfortable with those tools. So as Michelle said, you can email a group as you know their emails. That's why the emails are that their usernames are included, because that's their emails. So having a tutor in on the chat, yes, basically we have some tutoring resource, so you can request a tutor to be available for specific meetings within your groups, right? So do ask us and say, hey, we'd like to have a meeting. Is there a tutor time available? We've got 4 people who are doing tutoring, but one of them is stuck in Pakistan, so the timings are a bit off, and they are sort of distributed across the different projects. So you can ask us, we can try and organise to have tutors involved. Okay, so, and I'll just check on Discord that I don't have... Twitch has no transcoder today, so sorry, Twitch decided that it didn't get a transcoder. So if you want the 720p version, you can jump into Discord and follow me there in the Sven 303 lecture right at the bottom of the audio channels. Okay, so back to discussing. So how many people? So I've given you groups of 6. It was 2. We've now added 4. maybe 5 people to your group. So there should hopefully be 3 people in your group who weren't part of your design who could look at your design and give it this kind of feedback. Okay, so that's part of why we've done it that way. You don't have to do heuristic evaluation. I've said either cognitive walkthrough or heuristic evaluation, depending on which ones you feel more comfortable with as an evaluation tool. So, and now, at the moment, what we're doing is we're doing this on the projects you've been creating. You can also do this on other websites. So we could do a heuristic evaluation of Blackboard, or we could do a heuristic evaluation other websites, or a cognitive walkthrough of other websites, right? So these are not processes that you would only use in this kind of, we've built this design and we are merging things. These are general processes that designers use. So if we have a look at some of the details of heuristic evaluation, some of the ones that are recommended by industry is they have a bunch of categories, and then you evaluate within those categories. So these are the generalized categories. So this is the sort of 10 usability heuristics from the Nielsen group. So we have status, language, control, consistency, that there are no errors, recognition, shortcuts for expert users, that things are minimalism, that we're trying to remove excess clutter that's unnecessary for the interface or the process. Are there ways to recover, and what the help process looks like, right? So these are the categories that the heuristics could look at. And then, we could look at that as saying, well, okay, can we look at an interface like I've got here an Inkscape interface. I use Inkscape for my vector drawing, and then go through that and say, okay, let's have a look at some of this. So we go through here and say, is this, so are we going to check the status and, the functionality? When we're looking at a functional website, we're talking how long does it take to respond, is there feedback, those sort of things. So the status, when I click on things, does it update? Does it show me what's going on? You can see here it's giving you some status information that I'm on the pointer, so you need to be aware of that. It's giving you information about the currently selected items on that right-hand side, right? So on the left-hand side, I have kind of what kind of mode I'm in for selection and interaction. And on the right-hand side, I have additional information. So there's plenty of status information here. And then we have a look at the language. Is this the language of people who are editing vector documents? So we have a fill, we have a stroke paint, and we have a stroke style. So the word stroke is related to that drawing idea, right? So they're trying to use stroke rather than line, right? So rather than line paint and line style, or even line color, right? So you might find over here, we were talking about this fill area, and can I, oh, no, it's not going to let me zoom into that specifically more. But in terms of here, where we're talking about the word stroke paint and stroke style, that's quite unusual wording. What you might find a computer scientist might use would be line color and line width, right? So if you are from a different community, you would use different words. So you have to understand the language used in your interface might relate to the normal users of that interface, right? So that's what we talk about when we talk about language. Now, when we talk about control, so, how do I control this? What are the controls? Do I know what kind of interaction I have? And here we've got a fairly standard layout. There are tags at the top. There's type of control on the side, and there's a color thing along the bottom. So this is a relatively standard layout. So I could evaluate the controls. Are they appropriate? Are they in the right place? Is this consistent with other interfaces? The point between points control is a little odd because you have to learn it, but that's okay. These and as you get down further into the more specific controls that are Inkscape only, you might get some inconsistencies with other tools, but these first tools are relatively consistent. It has icons up here that allow me to rotate and flip, and it tries to give those as icons rather than words, right? So again, trying to make the control faster and easier to understand. And it uses relatively standard, the ruler icon, the magnifying glass icon. Those are standard icons to try and understand what's going on here. Even way down the bottom here, the eyedropper icon for collecting the color of a pixel. Right? That's quite an odd icon, but it has become the standard icon. So that's the one it uses. So here, when we go through, we can look at each of these things and step through ticking off is how good is this, right? Is it got? Are there errors here, right? Because with the heuristic evaluation, we're looking for, are there errors? Are there things that need to change? Right, so that's why if there's 0, as in there's the error I'm identifying here is cosmetic, then I say, oh yeah, you've it's a cosmetic change. Here maybe you might say a cosmetic change could be, well, I don't really like the fact that the numbers down here in the export area, this 0 isn't floating point aligned. It's left aligned. Those boxes should be floating point aligned. Right? That's a cosmetic change. Doesn't change the nature of the interface, doesn't change the usability interface, but it's cosmetic. And you could identify that and say, oh, this is a 0, this error. Right? So and that could be around an input error. Now, if it was I can't change the size of the width, or I can't unlock them or something like that, then you could put that down as higher and higher value for your identification of this as an error issue, right? So, because here we're thinking not, is this a pretty interface? Is this a good interface? We're doing are there errors with this interface? Are there problems with it? Right? So this is a heuristic evaluation looking for usability problems, right? You can kind of do an aesthetic evaluation as a separate thing, but this is what are the problems? Is this going to satisfy all the needs? Me as a user, when I'm trying to do this task, is there a problem that I'm going to encounter? Okay, so when we look at status now, some of these I've put the word functional next to here. You tend to need a functional website to evaluate some of these because the heuristic evaluations are set up as evaluating a website. Now you guys only have designs, so some of these prototypes that you have, you won't be able to evaluate in the same way, but I'm showing you the generalized usability technique because this is the ones that you would use for your more general work processes rather than just ours being a specific instance of it. So here we're talking about functionality. It's interesting, we have changed. It used to be that in 1968 100 milliseconds was considered instantaneous. Right? 0.1 of a second was instantaneous. Apparently the world moved more slowly in 1968. And people were willing to put up with a slower pace because the tools they interacted with operated at a slower pace. Now, we have joined a world where we have Twitch and YouTube and Facebook, and all of these now move very quickly. In fact, it was interesting that we as New Zealanders tend to speak very quickly. When I give these talks in America, I need to slow down to this pace, particularly in the southern states of America, where the speed at which I was speaking made it impossible for them to follow me. Okay, so I'll go back to my normal pace. So this is a challenge when you're working comparing some of the research that's done, older research activities. Yes, the weekly ASMR. So older activities were measured and said, oh, this is fast enough. And now we're going boom, 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 boom. And so we tend to need things to be faster. Now there is a perceptual limit around 13 milliseconds. It is hard to identify things that happen, differences that are less than 13 milliseconds, right? So we start to hit some of our perceptual limits in those very, very fast-paced activities. So there is physiological limits to this, but culturally, in that 0.1 0.1 of a second, so that 0.01 of a second, right? So a hundredth of a second, 13 milliseconds, is about the scope where we start to not be able to see the differences between things. So when you start saying, well, the 90 hertz refresh rate versus the 120 hertz refresh rate starts to be harder for us to actually clearly see that there are frame differences in that, right? And that starts to go into that perceptual limit. So once you're down at that speed, then yes, there's humans stop being able to interpret the feedback. So when we're evaluating status, if things take long time, you can comment on them, right? And if it's cosmetic, which I would say the 90 versus 120 might be cosmetic for most things, that's probably a 0. If you're trying to type and the cursor just pauses and you type for a minute and then you have to wait, yeah, that's kind of a level 4. That starts to be, level 3 maybe, right? It becomes more significant as a usability error where your status is not updating quickly enough. Right? So we also want to have, feedback on failure, where you start to do something and, I want to know early if what I'm doing is going to fail. Right? I find it very annoying to have to fill in a whole form, get to the end, hit go, and have an error pop up and it wipe the entire form. Right? That's extremely annoying, which is why you start to see them breaking forms into smaller parts and verifying each part as you go, rather than waiting till you've done the whole thing to kind of make sure that the status is being maintained and that errors are handled appropriately. When we look at language, we're talking about the language of the users. As I said, in Inkscape, it uses stroke, and it uses fill, and it uses stroke paint and stroke style, because that's the calligraphic drawing environment that it comes from. So it was using the language of its users. Right? So that's, as in heuristic evaluation, you look for where the language might be wrong. Where the colors, culture, those sort of things, right? All of the language characteristics are actually all of the concepts of language, including those cultural aspects. Control, how do I get in and out of things? How do I control the interface? Is there a clear undo or redo? Can I kind of accepting input versus doing work, right? So the controls are more about that accepting the inputs rather than doing the work. So it's kind of doing the work, and if I'm typing, I'm just typing, but there is these control elements that allow me to move around the document or change the what I've just done and go back and exit and things, right? So we can evaluate, are there any usability issues in there? Are these just cosmetic, or do they stop me being able to control how I'm editing the document, where I'm editing the document, or, going through the website, are there click-on control issues? Like, have I got broken links? Those could all be considered part of that control. Is there a clear way back and a clear way in and out of things? Consistency. Try not to reuse the same word to mean multiple different things, because that creates real cognitive challenges for a user. So what you do is you're looking for consistency, you do the scan through and check that everything is consistent, right? And that's actually a good thing to identify usability issues that are around consistency. Some of those consistencies might be cosmetic, right? You record it here as print, or you call it output somewhere else, all right? And say, print, output, similar. But where it might matter is if you use one word to mean like saving and overwriting, right? So save fresh or save new or save as. These are important to get right. If you get them wrong, sometimes you'll delete issues. We had an interesting issue with my partner. She was filling in an IRD form and using the signing on IRD and on the IRD PDF. And when she digitally signed it, she went to save as, and she went to save over top of the previous one she had tried to sign. But she signed it, because it couldn't write it, it dropped it, but it locked the document anyway. Because the way that PDF signing works on Adobe is that it locks the document. So the document was now locked, but not saved, and no longer had the signature in it because it didn't get saved at the time that the signature was being generated. And so it was Now I have to really fill in this entire form again and make sure I save as a new document, right? Because the way that it handled the error wasn't consistent with what it was trying to achieve. So, and this becomes that kind of preventing errors. So if you've got a functional website and you're looking for, are there ways that interface is preventing errors, right? What are the things that if I do something wrong, is it catching me, right? Are there constraints to validate your email inputs or those sort of things? So when you're testing it, does it ask for confirmation? These sort of usability things, right? So you're trying to find, are there ways that it stops me from unknowingly breaking the system, right? So that's where you have a functional website. You tend to need something that has that functionality. Recall versus recognition versus recall. Now this is an interesting one, particularly when we start talking about cognitive load, because what we're saying here is that, do I have to remember a lot of things about the state I'm in, or can I recognize what I'm doing, right? So we're trying to, generally with interfaces, minimize cognitive load. And so what we want to do to minimize cognitive load is we want to recognize the right option rather than recall the right option. This is the big UI difference, potentially. The big UI difference is the difference between, say, command line interfaces and GUI interfaces, is this difference between recognition versus recall. In a GUI interface, where you've got all your menu items, you just have to recognize which menu item to click on. On a command line interface, you have to recall the command to write. Okay, so this is why some people find command line interfaces much, much harder, because they rely much more on recognition than recall. All right, so understanding that the visibility allows you to use a recognition, which is lower cognitive load, than recall, which requires that memory, right? And so if you are someone who quite likes command line interfaces, then you might want to have someone evaluate your tool who quite likes GUI interfaces, because that's a different perspective on whether you should primarily be using recall to work out what to do versus recognition to work out what to do. So currently in GUIs, we tend to use recognition, and that's where you say, okay, can I see what I now need to do? Right? Is it visible? Do I repeat information? How is information modified as I go through the interface, and does it turn grey rather than disappear? And does it describe input formats? And so I don't have to remember the order things are in ISOM. I recognize, I'm trying to do that one. Right? You'll notice that with IDEs now, you start typing in a function, and the IDE will pop up the IntelliSense that tells you what order the parameters come in. Right? That means you can recognize what kind of formula you're putting in rather than try and recall the order of all of those. Right? So impact formats can be part of that. Another area that is a part of the heuristic is shortcuts. Are there shortcuts for people who are good at this interface? Right? So if this is an interface that is used every day, what kind of shortcuts are going to be there? Is it, control keyboard, kind of, control A, control S? Do those move me around within the document? Do they allow me to kind of do things quickly? Are there those kind of tools? Without confusing novices, right? So there still is a visual option, but if you learn the shortcut, you can become more productive, right? So finding that balance. If there's a usability issue that, a novice won't be able to do something, then that's an issue. An expert having to click many times to get through something will also irritate them, right? So that can be raised as a usability issue as well. Focus on the frequent actions of the users, either the novice or the expert. When you're doing the evaluation, you think about both. And are there these macros? Are there issues with those? Do they not quite do what you would think they would do? Minimal design. We're also saying that, when you're doing a heuristic evaluation, use minimal design. And this is where the design, is it showing the important stuff, or is it cluttering with just too much information. Every time you add something, you're adding complexity. Now, the problem is, because you are familiar with your interface, it is easy for you to recognize the parts that are most relevant and least relevant because you are very familiar with them all. A new user may not know that, and certainly an evaluator may not know those. And so part of their evaluation job is to look at it and go, not sure you need that there. Right? Now, if that's just it's cosmetic, you could take it away. That could be a level 0. If it's, it might confuse some of the novices, so you might want to take it away because it will cause some slowdown. So, a blue underlined piece of text that isn't a link. Someone's going to click on it, they're going to get annoyed. Right? It's not critical, it's not going to stop your website, but it will annoy people. So trying to get rid of some of those like low-level usability issues and kind of simplify and minimize the design to look for, have you overused color or have you grouped things correctly, and those sort of the minimizing and grouping things is where we look for usability issues here. Now we've got a couple of comments on Twitch, I'll just have a look at those. How to exit Vim style down number 1. Yeah, how do I get out of Vim, right? That is a recall rather than recognition, right? And most editors, there's an ability to recognize how you escape. For command line interfaces like Vim, you just have to remember and recall how to do this. That's partly why it's still the number 1 question. Have I assigned roles? I have not assigned roles to your group. I am letting you decide those roles, right? I asked you about roles so I could see that there was potentially a balance in some of the larger groups. How you use those roles is up to you. I will let you decide that. However, there are going to be roles, I would expect there to be roles that you will talk about, right? I will not define exactly what you have to do with those because these are your groups and you're trying to find your own way of being functional in these corona times. But those were suggested roles. So if you can't think of roles that you want everybody to take, you can default to those roles and say, right, these are the roles we gave people. These are who took those roles, and that's how they interacted. Okay, so it is up to you. It's a suggestion rather than compulsory. All right, now I do actually have another lecture I was going to do on animal roles, which I created in Norway. But again, that's not compulsory. It's just a tool that you can choose to use. Okay. Right. Painful GUI would be sign up to Pinterest to view this page. Yes. Okay. So, again, taking away unnecessary interfaces. Now, if we actually have a look back here, and I took it, I do the, is this overly cluttered? Well, it might be overly cluttered. Having always seeing the color picker down here, probably not really useful. This whole far right hand side, it's just a mess. It seems overly cluttered. I seem to have too much here. I should minimize some of these. Having this whole tiled thing here and a scroll bar, like multiple scroll bars. There's a scroll bar here and a scroll bar there. Which scroll bar can pause what thing? What am I doing? Why have I got so much here? Why have I got this large blank space here? That's because it works in these ones. It's just, some of this does look cluttered and unnecessarily cluttered. So again, finding that, and that's why you find other people prefer tools that aren't as cluttered as this. Okay, so you could give feedback, this is too cluttered. And the designer might go, well, yes, it's too cluttered for a novice user. We don't expect novice users to use our tool. If they want to use a novice tool, then MS Paint. We're trying to differentiate ourselves from something like MS Paint. So we have this more complex interface because of the target audience. Okay, so again, even though you're doing this heuristic evaluation and you're thinking about the rules, you still have to think the rules in terms of end users. Okay, and the types of users. That's why language is not just, is it using simple language, it's, is it using the right kinds of language. Yeah, I would argue that Inkscape isn't necessarily minimal. MS Paint might be. So error recovery, again, with a functional system, you want to see, when you make mistakes, are there plain language messages that the user can do something about, right? So do you just say error code 451 and, deal with it? And they have to Google that because that's what they're going to do. They'll take your error code and sign in Google. Do you have the ability to Google this error? You could actually, I've seen some interfaces use images for the error messages, and so you can't highlight the text in it, which means I have to manually type in the error message to then Google it. I have seen other interfaces which, given that they know that any error message they put out, people are going to Google, what they've done is they've actually added a link into their error message, which is Google this error. And you just click Google, and it will take that error message and search for it on Google for you, because they know that that's what the users will do. They're not relying on the fact that they will always have that they know the static page will be the best page to go and look at for the error, so they're just allowing people to Google it, and the internet will help solve these issues, right? And so they just try and make sure that their server comes up to the top in the Google search for that error message, right? But if there's a better service out there that other people have found that there's a better way of solving this than the company found themselves, then having that Google link in your error message is actually quite a nice usability feature, because we kind of know that's how these systems work, is that people will Google for the error. So using plain language, using ways that they can find answers to it, particularly useful if you give people choices where they can actually do something about the error, rather than just pop up an OK, you hit OK, and it says operation failed and just a single button OK, and it's kind of, which operation failed, because I was doing stuff, I'm not sure which one I was doing when it failed. Operation failed, OK. What does pressing OK mean? Does that mean I'm okay that it failed? Is it going to take me back to where I was? Is it going to close the program? Right? So that would be an absolutely horrendous usability fail, right? It might only be a 3 because it might not stop your site from being used, but it is still a significant issue when you just pop up error messages that have no way of understanding what they're actually connected to, i.e. they don't tell you what they just did, and they don't have you, and the responses the user give don't make it clear what's about to happen. Right? So when I press the button, so you need to think about error messages and your error recovery in that way. So identify the problem and suggest the solution, and really important to not blame the users. If you blame your users and your error messages, then they will leave your program, right? So don't blame your users. So why'd you press that button? You fool, right? So yes, if the user did it, it was a reasonable thing to do. Right? So try and keep that when you're thinking about error messages. Is there help features? Right? So in heuristic evaluation, we've got another area of the 10 is help features. Does the help is there help versus design failure? So this is a question of if you need a tutorial, is that because you haven't made a simple enough system? Right? If you just made your system better, you wouldn't necessarily need a tutorial, right? And you shouldn't need a help system if your system is intuitive and easy to use. I would argue that actually still having a help is useful, because there will be a percentage of your user group who want to see help and prefer to get help rather than just try things, right? And so this is that tinkering. When we talked about personas, there are this tinkering and risk taking. Well, help lets people who aren't risk takers read about what's going to happen before they do it, right? So I do not consider having a help menu an error of usability. I consider that catering to a different type of user. And so yes, it's something you can comment on and you can review in this heuristic evaluation. And user tasks are problems that people are trying to solve, and so they can sometimes need help with the path through the solution, right? And in the help, you should be offering concrete suggestions on what to do. And your help should be searchable. Right? So those are sort of things that you would check off to see as an evaluator that they are fulfilling all of these requirements. Okay, so what you then do is, and you can find this online if you do, as I gave you the link here to Nielsen's group. Oh, did that not come up as an actual? Oh, if I press space, it'll fix that. Yes, there we go. So here you'll find that these are these 10 usability heuristics, and you know it says 1994. Yes, we've been using interfaces for a long time. These are still generally good rules, and you can still apply them, right? So just because they're old doesn't mean they're wrong. Okay, these are still very good tools. And if you go to Heuristic Evaluation, you'll find a whole bunch of tools, and you can even find, if you do that Google search for Heuristic Evaluation forms, right? Because what you're doing is, oh, can I use a form where I go through and I click and fill this in? The answer is, well, yes, there are lots of them, as you can see here. The heuristic evaluation form, you'll find them, and they will follow this general rule of saying, you know, visibility, user control, consistency standards, flexibility, aesthetics, minimalist design. We talked about that. Severity ratings, critical, high, medium, and low. That's the 0 through 4. Well, actually, they only give low. They give 3 levels, right? Or 4 levels, right? Rather than 5 levels. Yeah. You'll have slightly different. And then just a severity, the URL you found it in, the location, what the issue was, and what the recommended solution was, right? So that's a simple form that you'll find online. You can, I will not tell you which one to use, but you can see, you know, there are many of these when you start looking. Visibility, match between system and the real world, user control and freedom, consistency pops up, error prevention here, recognition rather than recall, flexibility of use. So these are the kinds of things, and so these are going through each heuristic and saying what was the difficulty, what are the opportunities, what was wrong with this interface, how would you think about fixing it. Okay, so these are standard tools that exist out there, and you know this is a 2016 tool, so this is a more recent tool. This is, even though the concept was developed in '94 by Nielsen Group, this is still something that is used, and you know the UX Planet are using this in 2019. They've done this, you know, free templates for UX specialists, and you know this is a Jacob Nielsen's 10 heuristic evaluations, and an idea of how to go through that, right? So this is, and it will give you templates and those sort of things. So you can read about this. This is not something that I just thought up myself. This is used standardly throughout the industry. So if you want to know more, go and have a look at these sort of sites to find tools that you can use. This heuristic evaluation sheet, you know, face your design iterations. So this is a it's not going to let me zoom in on that because it's being uber clever as an image. So I hate that. So here they talk about severity of 0 to 4, as I talked about, you know, and I don't agree with this usability at all, right? I don't and the usability is catastrophe, right? So there's a 0s don't agree, 1 is cosmetic, 2 is minor, 3 is major, and 4 is catastrophic, right? So, and then again, issue and recommendation, and this idea that you go through visibility, match between system and the real world, user control and freedom. And so, yeah, so this is these ideas done as forms. If you follow that and you go and read, then yes, that will be the best way for you to see that there are an international standard around how to do this. Okay, so those are your choices for the assignment. Is I expect you to do either cognitive walkthrough or heuristic evaluation, or some mix, or both, depending on how much work you want to do. You don't have to do both. You can pick one and say, well, we're going to do a cognitive walkthrough, or we're going to do this heuristic evaluation. Okay, so that was what I wanted to talk you through. UX Planet is quite a good place, uxplanet.org. They've got quite a lot of good content, so this is a good website to go and look at for this kind of UX discussion. Okay, so Oh, okay. Have I so? So I'm just going to answer some questions. So, do you have any questions? Right. Okay. So that's there, and I have no questions here. Okay, so I've got one person on Discord watching me there, and I've got people on Twitch. Are there any questions? Now, I will be finalising the groups basically now, and then once I finalise them and attach them to the assignment, it will then generate the GitLab repos for your groups for the rest of the semester. So, and that's so you can link to those, and that's where you can share documents and you can put issues in there and start kind of organizing that more cleanly. If you've already started your own GitLab and you've started sharing stuff, then if you could move it into that group one, it means that myself and the tutors have access to it, and that we can more easily mark and analyze what's going on there, right? So you can still work in your own GitLab, but once we give you the team GitLab, it would be best for you guys to move there. It makes it easier for us. Okay, so, well, actually, I shouldn't bring up my email in front of you guys. I thought I'd moved that over. I don't even know what email you were reading at that point. Yeah, I have some emails that I'm dealing with. DevOps. Yeah, that's all right. Probably didn't cause any major problems. Okay, so do you have any questions? Are there any questions out there? I see, and I'm sorry I was a bit late today, guys. I had the Teaching and Learning Committee changed the order in which they're doing things, so I had to be in that meeting for an extra hour. I've recorded this. I'll put it up on Panopto, and send me emails. And this afternoon, you'll have all those groups will be finalised so that you can start working. There is still possibility to change groups that I've mentioned a little bit. It just requires a little bit more manual changing when from now on, so it's a little bit slower and harder for me to do. So I want to get this sorted now and get you guys working. And again, you're evaluating each other's designs. Many of you have made pretty close to full prototypes for your design phase, right? Because XD and Balsamic allow you to do that. That's fantastic. It means this heuristic evaluation and the cognitive walkthroughs you can do more easily. And you can then narrow down on the one that you're going to have and then clean it up using the ideas from the group. Okay, so I do not expect a full redesign from your entire group. That doesn't make sense to do. Don't pick a new system in your group and go, hey, we're going to design this new thing. That doesn't make sense. We are merging, right? So this is a narrowing, not an expansion phase. Okay, so is there any other questions? No. Seems pretty good. The reason why I went to the email is I was just wondering if anybody had actually sent me email questions or queries or problems, right? So if you do, get in contact with me by email and scream at me about your group being wrong, and I'll see what I can do. Okay. So that's 12:50. All right. So that hopefully gave you an overview of heuristic evaluation. And you can go and have a look at, the original Nilsson group, Jacob Nilsson. His ideas are foundational in this whole user experience, user interface discussion. So the stuff they did is seminal work, right? So often people refer back to his work because it kind of started creating this concept of what we mean by UI and UX. But you can see also in the most recent posted just a few months ago, you have professionals working in the space who are still using the same rules and have updated them lightly and changed them slightly, but are still generally trying to use the same. What issues did you find? What level they were? This is what we mean by heuristic evaluation. Okay. Have a great week. I will see you at 11 on Wednesday. And expect some more emails and communications. If you are having any problems contacting me, I'm not going to be on site, right? I know we've moved to level 2. I'm not on site. So you'll have to contact me through email or Discord. or if you need to, call my cell phone if you're getting panicky. It will be okay. Okay, so just and if you do need to go on site and you want someone to physically talk to, then it will have to move up to like James Quilty and the PDs and stuff, and Carson and stuff, right? So there will be people on site. We're not often going to be on site. It's probably easier for you to contact me digitally rather than trying to physically come on site. I won't be there anyway, right? Okay, so, but if any of you, or if you know other students who are having problems, please let us know, because we do want to make this as accessible as possible. Okay, well, have a great afternoon and start comparing each other's designs and start evaluating them. Good luck. I will talk to you on Wednesday. I'll go over my 6 animal model, which you can see here is we're working on these are the 6 animal model. I'll get rid of that. Where I use bears, wolves, owls, and puppies, and cats and rabbits. And you can see here we also I create this as a hex model of self-determination theory of agency, competence, and relatedness, also related to McKellen's 3 needs theory. So I'll talk more about that on Wednesday, and that's a way that you can manage group activities if you're interested. And we'll also go through some other things that you can do. But that will be for Wednesday. Okay, so have a great day. Email if you've got any problems. Email if you know any students who are having problems. Great. Okay. See you Wednesday.